Hello, Africa. This is Business Africa, and I am Ignatius Anom. Our top stories. Lesotho Revenue Authority looks to double government revenue as it continues full implementation of a tax modernization project. Cost of living soar in South Africa post-looting. In parts of Johannesburg, consumers have to contend with long queues as they struggle to get food. And a little later, a financial company makes its first initial public offering on the Central African Stock Exchange. Details right now. Lesotho is looking to double its government revenue despite the impact of the pandemic on the local economy. The country's revenue authority now has the financial backing to fully implement its tax modernization project. The small Southern African nation of 2.1 million people is banking on improved revenue collection for growth.
Lesotho began its tax modernization project in November 2017. The African Development Bank provided $7.09 million to help this Southern African nation begin the transition of tax digitalization at the time. The lack of financial support for the project has meant a slow pace of full implementation. Last week, the AFDB again approved a loan of $4.25 million to Lesotho to provide digital tax services. These would include e-taxation and e-payment. The financing will also help Lesotho to procure and install e-taxation, e-payment and e-invoicing. The move is geared towards broadening the country's tax base and boost government revenue. According to the AFDB, the project will also update and consolidate legal and institutional tax collection frameworks. It is expected to benefit taxpayers and the Lesotho Revenue Authority.
Thabo Hasipa is Commissioner General of the Lesotho Revenue Authority. He joins us from the capital, Maseru. It's a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignatius.
So first, help us understand the current state of taxation in the small Southern African nation and how a shift to digitization will boost government revenue.
The most collection comes from value-added tax and corporate income tax. Value-added tax, again, structured between your inland value-added tax, and then a very important component for a country such as Lesotho, with a lot of trade with South Africa, is the import VAT, which is quite significant. With the digitized platforms, we don't have to basically spend a lot of money. With us adopting data analytics, business intelligence, we then rely less and less on the traditional methods of having to audit every business in order to verify what they have to pay in tax, but rather we leverage the fact that in a digitized platform, you generate data, and that data itself, if we can then have warehousing, data warehousing facility, which incidentally is a key part of the Lesotho tax modernization project, data warehousing, in order for us then to also build the capability and the skills to analyze the data, generate insights out of that data, which can then allow us to do our job better, both for the benefit of the fiscus and also for the clients, i.e. the taxpayers.
Now, sluggish global growth, political instability and the pandemic has negatively affected the local economy. This has led to a reduction in revenue. What's your plan for a holistic coverage?
The context that you paint says potential for expanding the tax net in the form of maybe increasing collections from the same sources is highly limited. If anything, governments around the world are finding themselves having to rather provide support to stimulate the economy, as it were. And this therefore costs the fiscus. However, what then needs to happen, which is going to be the strategy that we are adopting, is to try and find leakages in revenue, find inefficiencies in the system, and try and make sure that we expand by actually plugging those holes. And digitization then becomes a key, tip of the spear, as it were, to try and plug those holes because, as I've indicated earlier, it enhances our efficiency in terms of collection.
Finally, if successful, you're looking at more resources for the state. What's your target for the medium term and proposed use of that revenue?
With the digitization journey rolled out, we honestly believe that we can double our inland revenue collection that we've been collecting recently. Here in Lesotho, we've been collecting plus minus 7 billion, and I'm talking only about inland taxes here. I did say that customs and excise are not part of that calculation. We believe it's quite feasible for us to double our collections by ensuring that also we modernize even the legislative framework, because we also have a rather generous, overly generous legislative framework that is not very well coordinated. You find that in our bid to attract investments, we sometimes get overzealous and provide everything that's on the menu that any country can provide. And at the end of the day, we don't balance that with the fiscals. And I think it's time that we try to do that. So we foresee a potential of doubling of that overall inland tax in the next 5 years, potentially to from 7 billion to 14 billion, quite feasibly.
Good talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignatius. My pleasure.
Thabo Kasipe is Commissioner General of the Lesotho Revenue Authority. Now, South Africa's economy was already reeling under pressure. That's even before restrictions were imposed to curb the coronavirus. And then a social unrest that affected thousands of businesses in two major provinces. KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng account for half of the country's GDP. Karabo Terence reports that the situation has led to a rising cost of living in parts of Johannesburg.
This is the aftermath. Long snaking queues for daily necessities. This is the only remaining big shopping complex in this densely populated and impoverished township called Alexander in Johannesburg. Everyday life is already tough here, but following the widespread looting, it's now an uphill.
We are struggling. We are suffering for basic things like Pampers and milk. When we have to buy food, it's a struggle.
What started as a campaign against the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma is now, according to the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, an insurrection. Thousands of people in the economic hubs of Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal provinces went on a looting spree, and the losses are eye-watering.
I've seen one number of 50 billion lost to the national economy by the Property Association. I've seen another of 200 billion lost to the economy by, I think, Rand Merchant Bank. So the widely divergent estimates of the cost to the economy. But I think the cost to the economy I think it goes far beyond just the numbers and the jobs that will be lost. It affects the confidence in our South African economy.
Alexandra is a stone's throw away from Africa's richest square mile, but the high levels of youth unemployment and poverty were always a ticking time bomb.
So there's a bleak future for most South Africans who will not be able to withstand the impact of this, what happened in the last 10 days, but also the body blows that the economy suffered in terms of the lockdowns that were over the top, in terms of the power outages and the austerity policies of this government.
New measures to support businesses and individuals affected by the looting are, by nature, short-term. The long-term worries are an underperforming economy, joblessness, high inequality, and a slow vaccination program, which is currently stunting growth.
And the Central African Stock Exchange has listed its very first financial company called La Regionale. As of Wednesday, July the 21st, shares for its initial public offering was trading at 42,000 CFA franc or 64 euros. Now, the listing of the company brings to 5 the number of companies listed so far on the regional stock exchange.
A new era is opening up for the Central African financial market following the merger on July 1, 2019 of the Douala and Libreville stock exchanges. They have just recorded the first IPO of a company in the financial sector called La Regionale. We believe that people will now be able to come to the stock exchange to buy La Regionale shares, and if they need money, they can also come and invest their shares, and this is our job and responsibility. This is also the first time that shares of a private company have been listed on the stock exchange, an operation that breaks with the gloom observed for 2 years on this stock exchange. SMEs have a lot of difficulty getting financing from traditional banks, and that's because traditional banks provide what is called short-term financing, whereas with the stock market, they can obtain long-term financing. So SMEs could benefit a lot from their participation in the stock exchange.
Il faudrait que le grand public soit de plus en plus.
The general public must be increasingly taught and educated about the stock market.
De la bourse. Et il faudrait aussi qu'on puisse.
It will also be necessary to explain to business promoters and company managers, both small and large, the opportunities that exist in the stock market. There is a slight shift in the dynamism of the Central African financial market. The stock market culture is absent. However, for finance professionals, 80% of companies in the CEMAC zone are SMEs based, which are in need of capital and should turn to the Central African stock market in order to raise funds which will help them grow.
Africanews, Douala, Cameroon.
And that's it for Business Africa. Head over to africanews.com for the entire program and more. I am Ignatius Ano. I thank you for watching and goodbye.